Alrighty, good evening, Remnants. My name is Sin. I am the PvE Department Officer for the World of Warcraft Division of Remnants of Hope. This is the first night of our raiding workshop, rather. We will be going over logs tonight, how to read them, how to get the most out of them, and how to get the most improvement out of your character that you can. I want to thank everybody who showed up tonight. We've got quite a few people, so that's awesome. I have already spoken with everybody whose logs I'm going to go through tonight. I have their approval, and I want everybody to remember that this is all constructive criticism, which is very, very important to keep in mind throughout this whole night. That nothing I say or do is with any kind of malicious intent. That being said, let's jump into logs. We're going to do last night's Gronk kill, and I'm going to be going over my own logs as a tank. I have one tank, one healer, one ranged, and one melee laid out for tonight. We might go a little bit over the 30-minute mark, but that's okay. So, when you pull up logs, you will see this screen right here. Basically, it shows your group composition, the damage by source, healing by source, damage taken by ability, and a graph with a whole bunch of squiggly lines that mean absolutely nothing. So, when you're going through your own logs, you're going to want to click the name. So I'm going to click Sin, and we are going to see a summary of my character as it was snapshotted right before this pull. So these are my talents for the pull. I'm just going to point out ossuary right here. This is important. This will come out later. So this shows all my Azurite pieces and gears by slot, damage done by ability, healing done by ability, any deaths if they were happen, and damage taken. This will be the same whether you're a tank, a melee, a ranged, a healer. Unless you have absolutely no healing, then this box won't exist. So, what I always like to check first is buff uptimes. So we're going to click over here on buffs, and I'm going to scroll down. We have major group cooldowns, which we had 2 rallies. We have damage buffs, which as a tank I'm not too concerned about. This is what I'm concerned about here from a tanking perspective, defensive buffs. Bone Shield, this is more or less my active mitigation. I should have 100% uptime of this no matter what. So as you can see right here, this little break in the lines of Bone Shield, I failed at that. That is a very, very large issue, and that needs to be corrected. So we're shooting for at least 99% uptime on Bone Shield. Being that you actually have to strike the boss, if there is a boss that you cannot be in melee range 100% of the time, it might fall off, but this is not one of those cases. This was just me making a mistake. But mistakes are fine. Mistakes is part of what makes us human. The difference between a casual raider and a progressive raider is a progression raider will understand that mistakes happen and try to learn and grow from those mistakes. Whereas the quote-unquote casual player will almost try to use that casual label as a shield for explaining why they should not have to get better, if that makes sense. My definition of a casual raider versus a progression raider is there's 2 things, time and attitude. Skill level means absolutely nothing. It's all about how much time you're willing to dedicate to your character, to learning your rotation, to doing research on your correct talents, to your Azurite traits, and how much time you're actually willing to give inside of a raid group. The second thing is your mindset, whether you are prepared to go in and kill bosses. If you walk in and think, oh, well, tonight's going to be a bad night, I don't really feel like being here, well, then your performance will actually show. So, that being said, being a progressive raider as I like to be, I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. I made a mistake. A very, very bad mistake. Bone Shield, what it does is it increases your armor by a lot. I think I have 8k when I'm buffed and 6k when I'm not. That's a big, big difference. It ends up being 12% damage taken. So that is a 12% damage taken that I have right here in this little gap. Ossuary, the talent that I chose, while you have at least 5 Bone Shield charges, the cost of Death Strike is reduced by 5 runic power. So if I had Bone Shield for 100% of the fight, but I actually allowed myself to drop below 5 charges, I would be getting no use out of that talent for as long as I was below 5 charges. So that's right here, you can see as I was building the charges back up, I was below that threshold, meaning for this little time stamp right here, I have 0 use out of one of my talents, which is a bad thing. Vampiric Blood, I casted it 3 times in a 4-minute fight. It's a 1.5-minute cooldown. It gets reduced, but I mean that's, you want at least one. You want at least all of your charges used of all of your defensives as a tank. Dancing Rune Weapon I did on cooldown, and a Magic Cell I popped for the Death Knells that came out to kind of absorb some of that damage. Icebound Fortitude, I'm going to get into this a little bit later. The big major cooldowns, you really kind of want to see where they were used if you really want to min-max as a tank, and we're going to go ahead and jump into that right now. So, I like to go to the Resources tab, and we are going to select hit points. And if we do this right here, drop down the menu and hit the plus sign, it will pop up a permanent graph up here with my hit points on it. So then we are going to go to casts. Oh, sorry, damage taken. So here is my health throughout the fight. This is my damage taken throughout the fight. So if we want to go to Source Aura Filters and find out exactly where I used Icebound Fortitude. So, right here, where these little gray lines, this is right where I used Icebound Fortitude. All of this graph is showing exactly what damage was mitigated through Icebound Fortitude. But you can see I had a very, very low dip over here, and you might be asking, well, why didn't you use it there? Or why didn't you use it here? And that is a good question, and here is a good answer for it. If you look here at what all damage I was taking here, you can see that I had 2 stacks of Rending Bite, which is a very hard-hitting dot. It hits for a lot of damage, 52k each tick, and I was getting ticks back to back. If you look at the timestamps exactly, I had 1 tick at 1 minute 8 seconds and 758 thousandths, and then 1 minute 8 seconds and 828 thousandths. So those ticks are hitting almost simultaneously within the same 10th of a second. So I'm getting hit for 100k every 2 seconds just with the dot damage. Plus I still have the boss on me. You can see that I'm still getting melee hits. And Bestial Impact, that is when the when Gronk picks you up and throws you. So, seeing that I had 2 stacks, I was still being meleeed, and I was picked up and getting ready to be thrown, I popped my Icebound Fortitude. Otherwise, I would have died on impact. So, in retrospect, that was a very good use of Icebound Fortitude throughout here, even though my health doesn't show it. If I wouldn't have used it, my health right here would have dropped and been down at 0 for the rest of the fight because I would have died. Going into resources again, we're also going to look at runic power, because you don't really ever want to cap on your resources, and you can see that the top of the graph is 100%, so I never really cap on my runic power. That is a good thing, because wasted resources is wasted DPS or healing or mitigation. However, whatever role you're going to put it into, it's wasted. So as you can see right here, 0 wasted rune power. If I would have been at full and cast a Heart Strike, which generates, I think it's 20 runic power per Heart Strike, you would have seen whatever I was over the cap wasted right here. As far as tanks are concerned, that is just about it. There were no deaths on this pool from anybody, so we don't have to worry about why I died and where I died and what I could have done to fix that death. I'm doing Gronk just because it is a pure single target fight with low-ish movement. It's not super crazy, so it's it's a pretty easy one to start out with logs. Alright, so the tank is out of the way. Does anybody have any questions about the tank logs before I continue?
No, just the ones that you showed us is the resources, the damage taking is the only things that we need to be looking.
For a tank, yes. This is everything that I just showed you is 100% tank specific. So this is if you were looking at a tank's logs. Damage logs are going to be different. I'm going to go over healers next, and then we will get into the ranged, and then hopefully Ty will have shown up and I can get into his melee.
Where was that first page that you showed us where we was using our abilities and you missed a spot? Where was that found out?
Okay, so that's going to be in buffs and defensive buffs where I had the gap in my bone shield. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be buffs, and you need to make sure that your name is selected here if you're looking for yours specifically. If I uncheck this, and I'm not looking at my spell myself specifically, this is what you will get. And it's a whole bunch of just, it's too much information for anybody to truly process unless you were looking for, like, if somebody was out of range for lust, you would use this to figure out why. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to look at. Let's go back to resources. For sin, and right here where my health dips super, super low, a lot of people would be saying, well, why? Why did it dip super, super low? And for that, we have a solution. Alright, so if you go to this button right here, it looks like a film roll, you will get the replay. Basically what this does is it shows an exact replay of everything that happened during the fight. So we're going to turn meters off, and we're going to hit play. So you can see on poll, I have myself targeted, so it's showing exactly what abilities I'm using as I'm using those abilities, which is, it's a really great tool if you don't know what's going wrong in a fight. You can look at this and you can see, oh, well, I can see who is targeting what. So the ad has just come out that you saw, and we're going to look at people, and you can see, okay, well, how long did it take them to switch to the ad? You know, that could be a tell of, well, what is going on? Why aren't the ads dying? If you have people switching late, you can catch it right here. So we are going to skip to, I believe it was 3 minutes into the fight, where I seriously almost died. I was at, I think, 3% health. And we're going to slow it down super, super far. Alright, so you can see all of my buffs that I have on me. I have 10 charges of Bone Shield. I taunted for the Rending Bite. And then I got picked up and thrown. And you can see my health. When you get picked up, you get dropped for 60% of your health. So we're going to watch. You cannot do any kind of abilities. And okay, so I was just thrown. And I hit and almost died. So we can look at healers. What were healers doing at the time when I was so low health? So Bloomy was also super low health because that was right after a death knell. So most of the group is really low health. We were also down one healer. So as I'm getting thrown, you can see the throw. Bloomy is putting a rejuve on Ix, a rejuve on Lake, also a Swiftman on Lake. I get thrown, still casting on Lake, and now she swaps to me because I was almost dead. So that is a decent, because I have slowed this down to half speed, that is actually a decent reaction time. So, it was just one of those things. What it came down to is I had 2 stacks of the Rending Bite on me again, and I did get thrown, which really, really hurt. So it was one of those things. I was running the wrong talent for this fight. I should have been running with Blood Tap, and I was not. So that is, once again, that is my mistake, regardless of the circumstances surrounding it. Okay, now I am done with the tanks. So we are going to look at healers now. So we're going to see the summary, check the talents. Talents look good. Azurite powers look decent.
We're lagging really bad. I'm still on the fight screen.
Okay, I will wait just a second for it to catch up.
Is everybody else behind too?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right. Now I'm seeing the summary for Blue.
Okay. Yeah, it's like 30 seconds behind now. It wasn't like that at first. So what you guys can do is just mute me in Discord, and you can listen directly off of the stream instead of listening in Discord.
Well, it's not only that, it's the whole screen that we're waiting for it to catch up to what you're.
You guys are seeing exactly what I'm seeing right now. I haven't moved anything. We're sitting at Bloomy's summary.
Yes, right now we are.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to look at her talents. We're going to look at Azurite powers. Gear looks fine. So we're going to go to the healing tab for Bloomy. Yeah, the stream is like really far behind now. Okay, so with the healing, we can see exactly how much healing each individual thing did. She had 2 casts of Wild Growth, 181 hits of it, and you can see how much healing it did. Rejuve is the next.
I just muted you in Discord, and I'm just listening to the stream.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I had it zoomed to a specific section, and I backed it back out. So Rejuve had 71 casts and did 22% of her healing, whereas Wild Growth had 10 casts, did 13%, and the list goes down and down and down. So, that healing, this is basically what healing should look like on your Druid. Rejuve should be top, Wild Growth. Effervescence is fight dependent. If there's a lot of movement, you're not going to get a lot out of your Effervescence. But, so we have Trank, all the healing spells, and that's roughly what it should look like. Rejuve should always be your top, because that's pretty much all you do as a Resto Druid, is just spam Rejuve on everything. So we're going to look at buffs. Before we look at buffs, we're going to go back to healing. And you also want to see uptimes, especially for a Resto Druid. So Rejuvenation had a 95% uptime, which means for 95% of the fight, she had Rejuve on at least one person. Life Bloom is at 55%, and that is actually quite low. You always want to keep your Life Bloom up. It doesn't have to be on the tank, but keeping it on the tank is a good bet. The reason why you want Life Bloom up at 100%. Oh, sorry. I was corrected. It will never be 100%. You want to aim for 70%. What you're looking for right here is clear casting. Your healing over time from Life Bloom has a 4% chance to cause your clear casting state, making your next regrowth cost no mana. So we had 7 clear casting procs. Let's see how many times. she cast Regrowth 16 times. So 7 out of those 16 casts were free. Costed absolutely 0 mana. So 7 of those very, very expensive, 14% of your base mana, that 7 of those were completely free because she kept her life bloom up for, for most of the time that it is able to be up. We're also going to look at Cenarian Ward, which is a 30-second cooldown. In a 4-minute fight, there should be 8 Cenarian Wards. And she has 8 casts of Cenarian Wards, so her uptime is as high as it can be expected to be. She used Ironbark 3 times at a 1-minute cooldown in a 4-minute fight. During the first minute or so, there should really be no reason to use it, so those kind of buffs, we're just making sure that she's actually using them when it's needed. So let's look at when they were cast and who they were cast on. If I can find it, there it is. Okay, so at 49 seconds, she cast it on me. At 2 minutes and 42 seconds, she cast it on me again. And right there at the end, she cast it on herself. Saving yourself as a healer is honestly the top priority. If you die, nobody gets healed. So if you have a choice while you're healing to either heal yourself or heal a DPS, by all means, heal yourself. It really, really helps out with me and Bloomy being 4 feet away from each other while we're raiding. She can ask me if I'm going to need it, and I will say no, I have cooldowns available, and she can cast it on whoever she needs to. That's not always going to happen on, for everybody else. That is very specific situation to our situation here. But, there's nothing that couldn't be said in Discord of, hey, Storm, you could ask me, hey, do you need wings anytime soon? And be like, nope, I'm good. I got cooldowns available. Guardian Angel is the spell that I was referring to, the wings. So, there's nothing that can't be said in Discord. Nobody's going to yell at you for asking a question in mid-pull, especially when it has to deal with a major cooldown. So we're going to go back to buffs and see. She did an Innervate once. It's a 3-minute cooldown in a 4-minute fight. You need to make sure that you're using your Innervate as a Resto Druid, so there's that. And that's just about it for a healer, as far as a Resto Druid is concerned. Well, that's not right. Alright, so do we have any questions about healing logs, specific to Resto Druid? Because other classes will be slightly different.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, awesome. We are going to go ahead and move on to our ranged DPS, and thank you once again, Raven, for volunteering.
You're welcome.
Alright, so we're going to look at the summary for Raven Crest. You can see the talents here, Killer Instinct, Chimera Shot, so you would check those against a popular talent site, whatever you prefer to use, Icy Veins, Wowhead. I personally prefer Wowhead. Their information stays more up to date. So, we're going to go to look at resources first for a hunter. And the one that I'm concerned about is focus. So we're going to add our little graph. We are going to go to casts. Alright, so here we see what everything was cast. The green line is the focus. So right here you can see these little plateaus. There are some focus caps, which, like I said, it's fine, mistakes happen. Alright, so right here we are showing kill command, and it looks like it's happening on a very regular basis. We have a few sections where it's not, but being that I know what this fight is, let's figure out why these gaps are there and why it's okay for them to be there. We're going to go back to the replay, and we are going to look at the 30-second mark. So right here at the 30-second mark, you will notice what happened. The ad spawned right at roughly the 30-second mark. So that means that her pet has to run from the boss to the ad, which would create a small gap in the kill command usage. Especially if she is running orbs with frost, which that's her job for this fight. So the kill command gap is fine. Multi-shot. We have discussed this a little bit earlier. On a single target fight, multi-shot is not worth it, and we're going to show why. We're going to look at damage done, and we are going to go down to right here, multi-shot. It cost 40 focus, was cast 26 times, and did a total of 30,000 damage. Whereas Cobra Shot, which is what you should be dumping your focus with, is 45 focus, was cast 21 times, and did 156k. So if we were to take these 26, and we'll go ahead and just average it out to 21 because of the five focus difference between the two, which is 4 if you do the math correctly, but just to make numbers simple, we will do 21. So if we could have gotten 20 more casts of Cobra Shot, that would have doubled this damage, so it would be 312k. 313k if you want to get technical with the 0.5. So that would have brought this up to over here, above Murder of Crows, right below Barbed Shot. That would have been an extra 300,000 damage over a 4-minute fight. It would have averaged out to be almost a 1k DPS increase. Possibly closer to 2k. I'm not going to do the math to figure it out, but you know that would be a pretty substantial DPS increase just by that simple mistake. Sorry, it's been a while since I've talked this long. It's a very simple mistake, and once again, mistakes happen. That's why we're here. We're going to find these mistakes and attempt to correct them. And the difference is that, you know, people who are wanting to be a progression raider, they will attempt to correct these mistakes, which I've already talked to Raven about, and she is very, very happy about trying to improve. So this is awesome. Chimera Shot was cast 15 times on a 15-second cooldown, which means you will get 4 per minute, so there should have been 16 casts of Chimera Shot, roughly, so we're right there. We're making good use of our talents. Murder of Crows is, I believe, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, so we're right there. I believe it's 30 seconds, so we're right there at the at what it should be. Barb Shot, we did have a discussion about the usage of Barb Shot. I'm not going to go into super strict detail, but we are seeing that she is using Barb Shot pretty much on cooldown, and that we can actually see exactly how much she's using it. Boom, Barb Shot. Now Barb Shot is a longer cooldown, and this was that previous gap from the target swap. She might have been out of range of that specific ad when it spawned. There's also a target gap here, which is when another ad spawned. So at a 12-second recharge, we definitely could have gotten more Barb Shots in, but that is not a major issue. We had good use of our Bestial Wrath at a minute and a half, reduced by talents and abilities. Six casts of Bestial Wrath in a 4-minute fight is actually really great. So good job on that. You make very good use of your cooldowns. You even used Exhilaration and a Health Stone, which is huge. A lot of people won't actually use their health stones for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it's a problem that plagues the entirety of the raiding community. But you're using your own survival cooldowns to try and stay alive throughout the fight, because always remember, a dead DPS does no DPS. So minor issues, focus capping and barb shot usage. A slightly more pressing issue would be the multi-shot. Just kind of training that muscle memory on single target to hit Cobra Shot instead of multi-shot, which goes back to practice. That's all it goes back to, is just 100% is practice. But overall, these logs look really good. Do we have any questions, comments, or concerns about the ranged logs?
Nope, I think you answered all the questions earlier.
Okay, awesome. And I'm sorry for the big delay for anybody watching this recording. The stream is having a very large delay. It's like almost 45 seconds to a minute, so I'm having to ask a question and then wait for the response. So let's go ahead and jump into the melee logs. And Ty is not here, but I asked him earlier if I could take a look at his logs and show them publicly, and he agreed to it. I don't know why he would be that crazy and then not show up to defend himself, but you know, it's Ty. So once again, we're going to go to resources, and I do this for all my DPS that use an actual extra resource. I don't really check for mana. I will check for focus, energy, and rage, as well as runic power for Death Knights. Rogues and feral druids, you also want to look at combo points, and with windwalkers, you want to look at chi. So, we are showing rage here. He starts off at 100 rage, which is fine. It's pretty typical for a warrior, especially right after trash. So, and after that, he doesn't really ever rage cap. He does plateau a little bit, which I don't know why. I haven't looked at his logs yet, but I'm sure we're going to get into it and figure it out. So let's go over to casts with our handy dandy little rage graph here, and we're going to look at bloodthirsts. So a 4.5 second cooldown, and it was cast 5 times in a 4-minute fight. That right there is a fairly large issue. So that is going to take me over to buffs, we're going to check out the enrage time. Alright, 8 things of enrage for 68%. Now, 68% is actually fairly good, but with better use of Blood Surge on cooldown like it's supposed to be, that could be much higher, or it could remain the same because it's Fury is a really RNG spec, especially when you're talking about your enrage. And I did speak to Ty a little bit about this after the raid last night, but we're going to go to damage done with his, actually, let's go back to buffs. And we're going to go to enrage, and we're going to hit the little plus sign. And we're going to get another handy dandy little graph where we can see actual enrages. And then we're going to go back to casts. And we're going to figure out what he was casting within those enrages. Alright, so Dragon's Roar. It is a very small cooldown, 35 seconds. So we should have roughly 8 within a 30-second fight. And it is only supposed to be cast within enrage. So the one major dip where he does not have enrage was the only cast of Dragon's Roar here. So that in itself could be another issue that we could work on, getting that Dragon's Roar within those enrage windows, without holding on to the cooldown of it for that long. Rampages, 5 casts of Rampage, which is about right. You know, you gotta build up that rage. You can see when his rage builds back up and then drops and then builds and then drops. Every time he uses Rampage, his rage will drop, and as he is building it back up, he cannot cast it again until he gets fairly close to max. I think it's 85% rage. So we can see that there, where he has used them and then built rage back up. So that is kind of what you expect to see out of a Fury Warrior. So let's look at Raging Blow. Raging Blow is supposed to be used on cooldown. I have this zoom set. Sorry. So, going back now, taking back everything that I said about his very bad Bloodthirst usage, but not really because it's Ty. We're going to look at Bloodthirsts. Okay, so that looks way better in the graph than the 5 that we're showing. And you can still see what I was talking about with the rise and the fall for the Raging Blows, or not the Raging Blows, the Rampages. And so we're also going to look back at Dragon's Roar. So the first one was in an enrage window, the second one was also in an enrage window, the third one was in an enrage window, the fourth one also enraged, fifth one it was enraged, the sixth one was the one that we were looking at that was not within the enrage window. So we only missed one enrage window for his Dragon's Roar, and that is a good thing. Siegebreaker usage is great. We're also going to look here. You want Siegebreaker and your Dragon's Roar to pretty much match up. Now, they are a different cooldown. Siegebreaker's 30 seconds, whereas Dragon's Roar is 35. So eventually they will spread out a little bit, but they will come back. This one, personally, I would have held that Dragon's Roar until I got the Siegebreaker back up, because it is a huge damage increase. It is a 15% damage increase on Dragon's Roar, which hits like a truck. So, you know, just a little bit of min-max, he could have held on to that Dragon's Roar until he got his Siegebreaker, which would have upped his DPS by a minimal amount, but it still would have upped it. Whirlwinds, I don't know why we're using Whirlwinds. Whirlwind is, I mean, it doesn't cost you anything except for a global, so I guess if you have absolutely nothing else to hit, then a Whirlwind is better than nothing. Because there is no cleave here. Here's the ad gap. So he probably burned everything that he had on the ad, all of his globals and everything, and was just weaving whirlwinds in to get a little bit of extra damage, which is fine. Because it's better than sitting there waiting on, your abilities to come off cooldown. Alright, so damage done. This is exactly what it should look like as a Fury Warrior. Most of your damage, over half of your damage should be, well, not 50%, but these bars should look pretty much exactly like this. Melee could be higher if we get a little bit better uptime on our enrages. And that would be smart usage of Bloodthirst, and very, very min-maxy if he gets the full rage and has the ability to rampage, but Bloodthirst comes off cooldown, he should try and get the enrage from Bloodthirst first. If he cannot get it, then he would use his rampage. If he does get it, then he would put in 2 filler spells. One would be like a Raging Blow and maybe a Whirlwind or something else, but you want that enrage uptime to be as high as possible, because melee is your second highest damage ability. So we can look at just the enraged gaps and we can see exactly what was going on while he was enraged. So Ty is actually doing pretty well. Bubbly says surprisingly. That's pretty much it as far as melee. Oh, no, there's one more thing. We're going to look at buffs, and we're going to look at recklessness, because Ty told me personally that he has a very hard time using his recklessness consistently. So let's check that out. So we're going to remove the rage graph and the enraged graph. We're going to put up the recklessness graph. So he had a cast of it here, and there is a talent that after you, or an Azurite trait that after you rampage, you get a small 4-second window of recklessness. So that is what these little bumps are. So he had one 15 seconds into the fight. It's a 1.5-minute cooldown. His second one is 1:45, which is a 1.5 minutes. His third one is 3 minutes and 15 seconds, which is a 1.5 minutes. So it looks like for this fight, he did really, really well at keeping his recklessness up as much as he could have. Sudden death procs, we can look at those too. That's also another talent. So let's put that up in a graph. And we are going to make sure that he casted his enrage within those windows, because if not, he did have a wasted proc. So that was an execute without it on the add. He used that proc, he used that proc, he used those 2 procs, and that proc. So basically you're just looking at the top to see when he got the proc, and at the bottom to see when he used that proc. This was during execute, so we're not going to look at all these, but it looks like every proc of sudden death was used and not wasted, so he's getting his full damage potential out of that talent. Fury Warrior is pretty straightforward when you're looking at logs, which is why I asked Ty if I could use his. Same with Beast Mastery Hunter. They're pretty straightforward as far as looking from a log standpoint. You know, they're not like Affliction logs or Assassination Rogues, which are, it could take me an hour at least to explain everything that you should be looking at as an Assassination Rogue. So, that being said, do we have any questions, comments, or concerns about the melee?
No questions. It sounds good.
Alrighty, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream, and we can all get back in Discord and discuss. I'm also going to stop the recording. If you guys have any questions About the whole logs itself, you guys can feel free to ask me. I will be around, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream, stop the recording so I can get it starting to get posted on YouTube so I can link it to the forums.